Table number 17 was pressed against the bathroom exit, hidden behind a marble column that no spotlight illuminated. And right there, someone had decided to seat the two most important people in my life: my father and my mother. Meanwhile, at the main table, directly in front of the stage, where in 1 hour I was going to receive the most important award of my career, my mother-in-law was settling in her country club friends, glasses of French champagne in hand. That table, the table of honor, the one that was supposed to be for my family, for my people, for the people who taught me to read so much. Before any sophisticated critic gifted me the privilege of their attention, I arrived at that Manhattan hotel believing that night was going to be the best of my life. My first book, The City's Blueprint, had hit 1 million copies sold in under a year. The publisher had thrown together a ceremony with press photographers, cultural heavyweights, everything a writer could dream of the first time around. But what I discovered that night, while fixing my earrings in front of the guest lounge mirror, was that to my mother-in-law, my parents weren't a source of pride. They were a problem. And my husband, the man I had been married to for 7 years, had chosen silence. I am 39 years old. My name is Sarah Jenkins, and I was born in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, where the streets still flood every time it rains hard. My father, Frank, was a cab driver for 42 years in New York City. My mother, Helen, sold homemade sandwiches by the subway entrance to make ends meet when I was a kid. I wasn't born with an important last name. I wasn't born with an Upper East Side penthouse, nor a weekend house in the Hamptons. My childhood smelled of old Ford Crown Victoria motor oil, of onions cooking at 5 in the morning, of the wax paper wrapping my mother's sandwiches. My dad came home every night smelling of gasoline and carrying stories. Passenger stories. The woman going to the hospital to say goodbye to her husband. The drunk politician who left him $100 tip. The crying teenager who climbed into the back seat because her boyfriend never showed up to the party. My dad had that rare quality found in humble men who have listened to everyone. He knew when to stay quiet, when to speak, when to turn up the radio, and he gifted me those stories throughout my entire childhood. While I did my homework on the kitchen table, and he drank his coffee before heading out for the second shift, those stories became the book. It took me 12 years to write it. 12 years of handwritten notes, of voice recordings I would make of my dad on Sundays in the kitchen while my mom made dinner. The City's Blueprint wasn't my book. It was his. I had only written it down for Richard. I met him when I was 31, at a literary event for a writer friend. Richard was a lawyer at a top-tier firm, the son of a family with old name and new money. And he told me on our first date that what he liked most about me was that I was nothing like anyone from his world. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Today, I understand it was a warning. His mother, Eleanor Sterling, received me in her Upper East Side townhouse the first time, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She asked about my dad. I told her he was a cab driver. I saw how she gripped her wine glass just a little tighter. She asked about my mom. I told her she sold sandwiches. I watched her look at her son, and in that exact moment, I suppose she decided I was a project that needed civilizing. Through 7 years of marriage, my mother-in-law corrected how I held my silverware, how I pronounced foreign names, how I dressed for family dinners, how I spoke to the service staff. I swallowed it. I swallowed it because I loved Richard. I swallowed it because I thought I was the one who had to adapt. I swallowed it because my parents had taught me that, in a family, you compromise. What I never swallowed, what I always defended tooth and nail, was my parents' place. At family birthdays, I made sure my dad was seated right next to Richard's father. At Thanksgiving dinners, I cooked the turkey myself alongside my mom because I knew my mother-in-law would treat her like hired help if I left her alone in the kitchen. For my niece's baptism, I chose my parents as godparents, even though Eleanor suggested 5 more suitable names. The book presentation was the first time the whole world was going to know who my father was. Because in every page, in every chapter, in every story, he was there. The book was called The City's Blueprint, but every serious critic knew it really should have been called Frank's Stories. My dad was going to receive a tribute, even if I was the one receiving the award. That is why, when the publisher asked me 3 months ago how I wanted the ceremony organized, the first thing I said was, "My parents are going to be at the main table with me facing the stage." Richard offered to handle the logistics. He offered. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. That evening, while the stylist was fixing my hair in the hotel suite, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel, my best friend since high school, the only person in the world who knew my parents as well as I did. The message read, "Sarah, hey, I don't want to alarm you, just walked into the ballroom. Why are your parents sitting all the way in the back by the bathrooms?" I thought it was a mistake on the publisher's end. I asked the event assistant to go check. She came back 5 minutes later with the color drained from her face. "Miss Jenkins?" she said, using that carefully trained voice of hotel employees who desperately want to avoid trouble. "The seating arrangement was changed this morning by Mrs. Sterling. She said you were aware." I walked out of the guest lounge before my hair was finished. I took the stairs down to the lobby with my heels still unbuckled. Rachel caught up to me on the staircase, wearing that look she gets when she wants to protect you without scaring you. "Sarah, wait. Before you see your mother-in-law, breathe." "Where are they?" "Table 17, by the back column. Your dad isn't even complaining. You know how he is. Your mom just asked me if it was normal to be so far from the stage." I stepped into the main ballroom. It was a sea of round tables dressed in white, with candles, white floral centerpieces, and handwritten place cards for the guests. Table 1, right by the stage, was already occupied. My mother-in-law, dressed in navy blue with a diamond brooch that belonged to her grandmother, was laughing with 3 women I recognized from country club dinners. Richard was right beside her in his pearl gray suit, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The chair that read Sarah Jenkins Honoree sat empty waiting for me. Next to it were 2 other empty chairs. The place cards didn't have my parents' names. They read Dr. and Mrs. Sterling. My parents weren't there. They didn't even have a reserved spot at the main table. I walked toward the back of the room. Every step felt heavier than the last. I weaved through the tables, smiling at the guests who recognized me, nodding at the critics offering congratulations, until I reached table 17. There was my dad, in his only blue suit, the one he bought 15 years ago for my cousin's wedding. His tie was slightly crooked, and he had the face of a man who knows exactly where he has been put, but has no intention of saying a word. Next to him was my mom, in her pale pink dress, and the hair she did herself, at home, before coming because she didn't want me spending money on a stylist for her. "My girl," my mom said, standing up to hug me, "you look so beautiful." We were waiting to see if they would move us, but the young man already told us, this is our spot. My dad stood up slowly, too. "Don't worry, Sarah Bear. We can hear just fine from up here." That "we can hear just fine from up here" split my soul right down the middle. Because my dad said it without an ounce of sarcasm, without complaint, without bitterness. He said it as if he were apologizing for bothering me with his presence. "Let's step out for a second," I told him. "I am going to fix this." "No, honey, don't make a scene." My mom grabbed my arm. "It is your night. We don't want to ruin it for you." You are not the ones ruining it for me. Someone else is. I walked straight to table 1. Richard saw me coming and he knew. I know him. After 7 years of marriage, a woman knows the face of a man who knows exactly what he did. He lowered his whiskey glass slowly, as if trying to buy time. Sarah, you look stunning. My mother-in-law smiled at me, rising with open arms. Come, sit down. We were waiting for you, Eleanor, I said without a trace of a smile. Why are my parents at table 17? My mother-in-law's smile didn't flinch, but something in her eyes shifted. The woman is like a professional actress. She knows how to reassemble her face before speaking. Darling, there was a minor adjustment with the protocol. The hotel's event management told us that for these types of galas, the tables of honor are reserved for cultural authorities and sponsors. I simply followed their guidelines. Your parents are perfectly fine where they are. The table of honor was for my family. It was for my parents. Sarah Richard intervened, dropping his voice like we were in a church. This isn't the time. You are nervous. It is understandable, but we can't make a scene here. I looked at him. I really looked at him for the first time in a long time. And I saw a man who had already made his choice. Not tonight. Months ago. Maybe years ago. Richard, I asked you for one single thing. I asked you to handle the seating arrangements and put my parents with me at the main table. And I told you I would handle it. And this is how you handled it? Eleanor took the floor with that soft, silken voice she uses right before sliding the knife in deepest. Sarah, darling, let's speak frankly. Tonight there is press. There are cameras from several major newspapers. There are people from the cultural elite. And your parents, with all the respect in the world, do not fit the image we are building for your career. Your father arrived in a beat-up Chevy and tried to valet park it himself. Did you know that? The valet manager actually came to ask me if he was family. Sweetheart, an image like that simply cannot be shown on a night like this. I am protecting you. Every word was a surgical strike. A beat-up Chevy. An image like that. I am protecting you. Protecting me, I said. That is what this is, protecting me. Sarah, don't cause a drama, Richard said, grabbing my elbow. Let's sit down. We will talk after the ceremony. But I didn't sit down. I pulled my hand out of my husband's grip and took a step back. And from that step back, I looked at table 1. I saw the champagne flutes. I saw my mother-in-law's friends in their pearl necklaces. I saw the newspaper photographer snapping a shot right at that moment, completely oblivious to everything. I saw Richard, my husband, wearing the face of a man who prefers comfort over the truth. And I knew that something inside me had broken for good. I walked back to table 17. I sat down with my parents. My mom grabbed my hand. My dad didn't ask a single question, but he poured me water from a pitcher in the center of the table, as if he knew my throat was dry. My girl, he said quietly. Your mother-in-law was rude. My mother-in-law was my mother-in-law, Dad. And what did he say? I didn't answer. My dad understood. My mom smoothed her hair with a tiny, nervous gesture. The gesture she uses when she is uncomfortable and doesn't want anyone to notice. Honey, if your husband doesn't want us here, we had better go. We will grab a cab and head back to the house. We don't want to ruin your night. You are not going anywhere. Look at me, Mom. You are not going anywhere. Trust me. Just this once in your life. Trust me. Right then, Rachel walked over. She sat next to me without saying a word. How does she always know? She rested her hand on top of mine. After a minute, she whispered, Sarah, it is not just tonight. Remember Lucy's baptism, the New Year's Eve dinner? When your mother-in-law told your mom at Thanksgiving that the flowers she brought looked like they came from a gas station? Yes, I remembered. I remembered all those times I kept my mouth shut. At Thanksgiving dinner, when Eleanor served my mom white wine over ice, knowing full well you don't serve white wine with ice, knowing my mom wouldn't catch the insult. I remembered the time my mother-in-law told my dad in front of the whole family what a shame it was that his generation didn't have the opportunity to get an education. I remembered when we arrived at the house in the Hamptons, and my mother-in-law pointed my mom toward the maid's quarters in case she wanted to freshen up. I remembered every single one of those times. And every single time, Richard had stood there and said absolutely nothing. Every single one, without exception. While I was drowning in that sea of memories, I heard a familiar voice from the next table over. It was my mother-in-law. She hadn't seen me. She was talking to one of her friends, using that slightly elevated pitch she gets when she is absolutely certain she is right. You just don't understand Patricia. My daughter-in-law has a lot of talent. Nobody can take that away from her. But the people she comes from? Oh, darling. My son married her, not her people. And we have to protect the family's image. There are going to be photos in the Times tonight. Just imagine a picture of the cab driver standing with all of us. What would they say at the club? Rachel squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Sarah. You heard that right. Yes. What are you going to do? I looked at my dad. He was sitting with his hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead at the stage 40 yards away from us. And then I noticed something. My dad's eyes were wet. He wasn't crying. My dad never cried. But his eyes were wet. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. At 9 o'clock sharp, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. He announced the start of the program. He talked about the publisher, about the importance of contemporary American literature, about the authors who had won in previous years. I didn't hear a word of it. I was only looking at my dad, sitting in his only blue suit, hidden behind a column, on a night that was supposed to honor him. At 9:20, they introduced me. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the National Literature Prize for her novel, The City's Blueprint, a story that has moved 1 million readers across this country. Sarah Jenkins. Applause. Spotlights. My name bouncing off the ballroom walls. I stood up from table 17. Not from table 1, from table 17. I walked toward the stage, taking a long way around the room, weaving through the tables, feeling the exact moment the guests slowly realized the honoree was walking up from the very back, not from the front. I saw my mother-in-law's face drain of color. I saw Richard desperately trying to process what was happening. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. The master of ceremonies handed me the plaque and the envelope with the prize money. He shook my hand, pointed to the microphone, and I took it. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I waited 3 seconds. The applause died down. The room fell into absolute silence. I had a speech prepared for tonight. I wrote it 2 weeks ago. I rehearsed it in front of the mirror. I was going to read it thanking my publisher, my readers, the people who made this book possible. But tonight, about half an hour ago, I discovered that there are people in this room who decided that the most important people in my life didn't deserve to be anywhere near me. They decided that my parents didn't fit the image. A low murmur rippled through the ballroom. I watched as several guests turned their heads toward table 1. My father, Frank Jenkins, drove a cab in New York City for 42 years. My mother, Helen Jenkins, sold sandwiches by the subway entrance for 20 years, just so I could go to school. And this book, that just won the National Literature Prize, this book that has sold 1 million copies, it isn't mine. It is theirs. I paused. I looked dead straight at table 17. Dad, Mom, can you come up here with me, please? My mom covered her mouth with her hand. My dad didn't move a muscle. I had to say it again. Dad, Mom, please, come up. The most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life was watching my dad slowly, with the quiet dignity he learned from hauling luggage and driving cabs and dealing with drunks his whole life, stand up from table 17. He offered his arm to my mom, and they walked to the stage together. As they walked, the room erupted in applause. Some guests stood up, others didn't. My mother-in-law remained frozen in her seat, white as a ghost. When my parents reached the stage, I placed them right beside me. My dad's face was flushed red with embarrassment. He wasn't used to being seen. This envelope I am holding right here, I said, raising the prize envelope, contains $100,000. And I am handing it in its entirety to my father, Frank. Because every single dollar of this book belongs to him. Every story, every page, every word is his. I was merely the hand that wrote down what he taught me. My dad looked at me terrified. I pressed the envelope into his hands. He held it like it was made of fragile glass. And there is one more thing I want to announce tonight. Here it came. I felt like my heart was going to hammer right through my ribs. 7 years ago, I married Richard Sterling. Tonight, in front of all of you, I am announcing that this marriage ends here. The room turned to ice. I clearly heard the sharp shatter of a wine glass hitting the floor. I asked my husband for one single thing tonight. Just one. To protect my parents' place. He didn't do it. And it is not the first time he has chosen the wrong side. But it is the last. I stared directly at table 1, right at my mother-in-law. And to Mrs. Sterling, I want to say this in front of everyone here. My parents do not sit at table 17. My parents sit wherever I sit. And if I am placed at a table where they are not allowed to be, then it isn't my table. A table where my people don't fit is not a table where I am a guest. It is a table where I am on display. I lowered the mic. I took my mom's hand, linked my arm through my dad's, and walked off the stage with them. The clapping started slow, hesitant, then grew louder until the room was on its feet. I saw Rachel clapping, tears streaming down her face. I saw the Times photographer firing off one shot after another. I saw an older woman at table 5, nodding her head slowly, as if recognizing a ghost she had battled herself. I didn't look at Richard. I didn't look at Eleanor. I walked straight toward the exit with my parents never breaking stride. We walked out of the hotel without stopping at the coat check. I didn't care about my jacket. I didn't care about my purse. The only thing I cared about was getting to the parking garage where my dad had parked his old Chevy. When I saw that beat-up white sedan with the scratch on the passenger door that had been there for 8 years, I broke down crying. But not out of sadness, pure relief. My mom held me tight, and my dad wrapped his arms around both of us. Right there in a Manhattan parking garage with twisted heels and ruined hair, I felt at home for the first time in a very long time. "Let's go home," my dad said, opening the door to the Chevy. "Your mother has food waiting." Rachel came sprinting out 2 minutes later. She tackled me in a hug. "Sarah, you are an absolute lunatic." "A wonderful lunatic." "But are you sure?" "More sure than I have ever been in my life." "What about your things?" "The house." "The house always belonged to Richard and his mother. I am taking what is with me right now. The rest was never mine to begin with." That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom. My mom lent me an old pair of pajamas. My dad brought a mug of chamomile tea to my bed. When he sat down next to me, he took my hand. "My girl," he said, "what you did today, I could never have done that." "Yes, you could have, Dad." "No, I was always more afraid than you. That is why I put up with so much, for so many years." "You didn't put up with things. You worked so that I would never have to." My dad let out a soft laugh, kissed my forehead, and turned off the light. The months that followed were brutal. I am not going to lie. Richard called me 47 times the first week. My mother-in-law sent my mom a massive floral arrangement with a card begging for a chance to explain herself. My mom threw the flowers in the trash, and the card followed unopened. Rachel helped me find a small apartment in Brooklyn. My dad helped me put the furniture together using the same toolbox he had kept in the trunk of his Chevy for 30 years. The divorce took 8 months. Richard tried to fight me for the book royalties. My lawyer politely explained that those royalties were registered in my name prior to the marriage. My mother-in-law tried to call me twice. I told my assistant to block the number. Richard moved back into his mother's townhouse. Rachel told me that nobody at the country club speaks to him anymore, and my publisher mentioned that Eleanor canceled her club membership 6 months after the ceremony because she simply couldn't handle the stares. The video of the microphone drop went viral. 2 million views on YouTube in 3 weeks. A woman in Dallas sent me a message saying that after watching my speech, she finally found the courage to pack her bags and leave the house where her mother-in-law had abused her for 9 years. Another woman in Seattle wrote to tell me she called her parents and begged for their forgiveness for pushing them aside her entire professional life. My publisher asked me to write a second book. I am writing it right now. It is going to be called Table 17. It will be dedicated to all the sons and daughters who one day had to choose between their own flesh and blood and those who sold them a lie of respectability that was actually just contempt disguised as manners. If you are listening to this story and some part of you recognizes it, let me tell you something. Your parents are not your shame. Your parents are not your resume. Your parents are the roots that hold you steady when everyone else walks away. Sometimes we are tricked into believing we have to choose between our past and our future. They make us believe that to grow, we have to forget. That to enter new worlds, we have to leave ours stranded outside. That to sit at the main table, we have to accept that our people are shoved into the shadows at table 17. It is not true. It was never true. If your partner, your mother-in-law, your boss, your sister-in-law, or whoever it is, asks you to hide your parents, to stash them at the table by the bathrooms, to pretend you come from somewhere else, just so nobody feels uncomfortable, that person does not love you. They love a highly edited, convenient version of you, and that version isn't real. My mom told me something once, long before any of this happened. Back when I was a kid and got into a fight with a classmate and made fun of the homemade lunches my mom packed for me. "My girl," she said, "a table where your people don't fit is not a table where you are a guest. It is a table where you are on display." Today, I finally understand what that means. And that is exactly why I walked away from that table. If this story struck a chord, if it reminded you of someone, if right now you are picturing a table where someone is making you feel like your parents are an inconvenience, share this. Maybe someone out there desperately needs to hear it tonight to finally make the decision they have been putting off for years. Tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Do you have a similar story? I read every single one of you. Until next time, my beautiful people. And remember, your parents' place is always right by your side. Sometimes you don't need to scream or seek revenge to reclaim your dignity. All it takes is standing up, taking the hands of the people who gave you everything, and walking toward where you truly belong. Sarah didn't get on that stage to humiliate anyone. She got up there to tell her dad in front of the entire world that his beat-up Chevy was worth more than every glass of champagne in that room. That is what true love does. It gives you the absolute courage to choose right. A quick note. This story was generated and narrated by artificial intelligence, with the sole purpose of entertaining you and sharing a positive takeaway you can apply to your daily life.